All right, I'm going to start letting folks in. Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everyone. As you're joining, if you want to drop in the chat where you're calling in from, say hello to the community. We're excited to have you all today. It's going to be a really interesting conversation about greenwashing and how to identify it, and some important campaigns that are going around about greenwashing. So appreciate you taking the time out of your morning to join us for this conversation. Hi, Liz from Germany. Hello, hello. Awesome. Okay, just to get us started, a little introduction. So we are here with Remake. Remake is a global nonprofit organization on a mission to change the fashion industry's harmful practices on people and planet. We are also on a mission to try to make sustainability more accessible and inclusive. So that ties into this conversation today about greenwashing and how we would like to equip you with tools to identify it and talk about it and call it out. We have also been championing a 90-day no new clothes campaign. So all summer long, we've been encouraging pledge takers to commit to 90 days of no new clothes. No new clothes can mean whatever it means to you. We just interpret it to mean like slowing down, resetting your relationship to fashion, perhaps choosing secondhand first, and trying to have that mental reset with your relationship to fashion, reflect on what the fashion industry, the ways that the fashion industry needs to improve, and the role that we all play in that. So like I mentioned, it's been our summer campaign. Of course, you can take the No New Clothes pledge anytime. Here is that pledge link if you're interested in taking it. You could even decide to, if you've been taking it all summer long, continue and take it for the rest of the year. We will cheer you along no matter what your journey looks like. Like I mentioned, Remake is powered by a global ambassador community. And so we have lots of change makers who work together with us to make this work possible. And really quickly, before we get into the bulk of today's call, I wanted to welcome up Carolina, one of Remake's ambassadors, to share a very cool project that she has just done in collaboration with Remake.
Thank you, Emily. Hi, everyone. I'm Carolina, and I am the owner of a shop on Etsy called Just a Cactus, where I sell printables, digital planners, diaries, and notebooks. And if you don't know, Etsy is full of shops like this, and so I was looking for a way to stand out and what made my shop special. Why would people buy from me and not from other people? And so, well, then it struck me that Remake is a part of me, so it made perfect sense that it would be a part of my shop as well, and that I could reach so many people and help in our mission. So I decided to use my shop and my products to help spread the word and create awareness for what we're doing here. I reached out to Remake to know if they were interested in sending some data, some ideas, anything that could help develop these products. I think I will share my screen now so you can know what I mean. Here. I don't know if you're seeing. Yeah? Okay. So here's the shop, and here are the 10 products that are part of the Remake collection. All of them, except this first one, are digital. The first one is printable with journaling prompts, which are ideas to help us journal. And in this case, they're all connected to sustainable fashion. And well, after some months months of working on this. Many emails were exchanged, and I'm so happy to be sharing this with you guys. I'm just so proud of all this work we've been doing. I really believe that this can make some change. And all of these products, they have some data, some tips, tricks, all of that, so we can create a more sustainable closet as well. And I'll show you maybe this one. So here, like you have here in this planner, the months have some data, and I think it's the days here that you have some tips. So it's more it's easier to be connected to all of this all year long. And besides spreading awareness and educating people, all of the profits that come from this collection, 40% will be donated to Remake as well. And well, I think that's probably it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This is such an exciting project and just a really great example of like how cool and collaborative our ambassador community is. And we really thank you for like coming to us with this idea and working with the team on it. So appreciate you being here to share about that today.
Yeah, thank you.
You're so welcome.
Okay, you already placed the link here. I was going to do that, but sure.
Perfect. All right, next up, I'm going to welcome Becca Coughlan, Remake's Transparency Manager, and she's going to give us an introduction onto the topic of greenwashing. Hi, Becca.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. God, just wait.
All right, can you see my slides?
Yep. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks everyone for joining us to chat about greenwashing today. I could honestly talk for hours about this topic, but we have limited time, so I'm just going to dive right in. If you could just hop to the next slide. Thank you. Greenwashing refers to the practice of conveying a false impression of or making unsubstantiated or exaggerated claims about the extent to which a company or product is environmentally sound. The term was coined in the mid-80s by environmentalist Jay Westervelt, and it seems like since then, the more ecological breakdown, biodiversity loss, and extreme weather events we bear witness to, the more adept corporations have become at capitalizing off of the climate crisis and the increased awareness and concern we collectively have about our role in provoking it. Greenwashing occurs in probably every industry today, but I will of course be talking about some of the ways it presents itself in fashion specifically. Fashion brands have long been able to portray themselves, or at least parts of themselves, as sustainable because there is both a lack of understanding amongst the general population as to how and where their clothing is made and by whom, and a disturbing lack of regulation around the definition of labels pertaining to sustainability in garment supply chains. And so brands do all of this so that they can continue to sell us their products and sell us on the entire business model that is responsible for the climate crisis in the first place, which is extremely frustrating because if companies spend as much time, money, and energy into trying to actually address the climate crisis as they do trying to sell us on the idea that we can buy our way out of it, we might not be in such a pickle. So I'm going to give 3 examples of greenwashing today, and unintentionally they all involve H&M. But H&M, as we might all know, is the master of greenwashing, and often where they lead, others follow. So my first example is eco collections. And I love this example because it is increasingly the most common tactic used by brands to make people feel more comfortable supporting their destructive and exploitative business models. I am sure we are all familiar with the small sustainable capsule collections with ethereal sounding names that more and more fashion brands are adding to their product offering. I'm talking H&M Conscious, Zara Joy in Life, Mango Committed, ASOS Responsible Edit, and even Boohoo has recently come out with a line called Ready for the Future. So why are these lines greenwashing? Well, firstly, as mentioned, the lack of regulation and laws around the definition of words and phrases in the sustainability space leaves the door wide open for brands to use intentionally vague language to inflate the ecological credentials of the products in these lines. Secondly, despite the many years that have passed since the introduction of a lot of these sustainable collections, they somehow still represent such a tiny portion of brands' overall product offering. Their supposed better production processes are still not the status quo in terms of brand business models as a whole. H&M Conscious was launched in 2010, Zara's Joy in Life in 2016, Mango Committed in 2017, and none of these brands have integrated their sustainable collections into their larger product offering. And to me, this just proves the tokenism of these product ranges and that these companies are really not serious about addressing their environmental impact. Thirdly, these collections very conveniently ignore the important social justice factors that should be included in the true meaning of sustainability. They are, I'm sure, more often than not produced in the exact same factories under the same poor working conditions as brands' main collections. And Boohoo's Ready for the Future collection retails for between £4 and £20. There's absolutely no way that at those prices, Boohoo's garment workers are earning enough to be able to sustain themselves and their families. My next example is sustainability ambassadors. We can go on to the next slide. Earlier this year, we saw Maisie Williams announced as H&M's Global Sustainability Ambassador, and Primark similarly announced Love Island presenter Laura Whitmore as their Primark Cares Ambassador. These roles are largely ceremonial, and while we could look at them as doing a lot to bring sustainability efforts or sustainable fashion into the mainstream, because of how ingenuine the sustainability efforts of these brands are, these ambassadorships are seriously problematic. They still intentionally mislead the average consumer into thinking that our current system of overproduction and overconsumption is okay. H&M is using Maisie to continue to promote their Conscious collection and to sell their Loop garment recycling technology as the main solution to all of our climate woes. Environmental justice is compatible with the pursuit of infinite production and economic growth, which, spoiler alert, it isn't. Scientists and economists alike have proven that the carbon emissions reduction that we need to hold the climate breakdown is just not feasible if we continue to pursue unlimited economic growth. So not only do we need to produce better, we seriously need to produce less. My final example of greenwashing, which again, surprise, is H&M, is possibly the most disturbing one yet. H&M's latest advertising campaign uses the stories of young social justice and climate activists to sell a collection of more sustainable t-shirts with inspirational quotes on them and to tell us how they're going to be climate positive by 2040. This example is particularly laughable because in 2019, the former CEO of H&M, Carl-Johan Pearson, called climate activists a social threat and told Bloomberg that protesters telling people to consume less might lead to a small environmental impact, but that it would have terrible social consequences. And many of the children in this ad campaign are children of color living in the global South. And so it's completely ridiculous to think that H&M is celebrating them using their voices while continuing to promote the exploitative capitalist system that is responsible for the climate crisis that is already most adversely negatively impacting them. You can go down. Sorry, Emily, thanks. And again. I would say that as long as companies continue to pursue unlimited economic growth and pretend that even conscious consumption is the answer to all of our climate woes, I would argue that any actions they purportedly take on behalf of people and planet is greenwashing. However, if you are in need of some clarification, would just like to do some investigating of your own, Remake's brand directory or apps like Good On You are a good place to start. We are in the midst of updating our brand assessment criteria at the moment, but you can still go and look up loads of different brands on our brand directory and see exactly how we are scoring them on different social and environmental factors, and whether they are as genuine in their pursuit of environmental justice as their ad campaigns say they are. Also, please, everyone, feel free to start requesting brands you'd like more intel on. We'll hopefully begin adding more brands in the fall. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Becca. Now I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Cline and Corey Spencer, and we're going to have a discussion around the FTC Green Guides campaign.
Thank you, Emily. Hi, everybody. So before I start our conversation with Corey, I'm just going to give everybody a little bit of an overview about how I became aware of the FTC's Green Guides. And then I'm going to introduce you to Corey Spencer from AMENDI. It's really important to have a brand's perspective in this conversation. So that's why we're so excited to have Corey here today. So I'm just going to share my screen and talk y'all through the FTC Green Guides, and hopefully we won't have any more disruptions. Okay. All right. So can everybody see okay? So a couple of years ago, I was asked to write a story about greenwashing for Patagonia. And I was given editorial freedom. They didn't interfere with my process of writing the story. And what I sort of discovered, which is what Becca is hinting at, is that greenwashing at some point started out as sort of a nuisance, overselling environmental claims. And then as the climate crisis has sort of accelerated, it's become dangerous, right? So I wanted to really start to understand what kind of solutions are available for greenwashing. Is there any way to actually stop it? Because I know sometimes when we're talking about it, it just feels like there's nothing that we can do about it. So it was in the process of reporting for this story that I first found out about the FTC Green Guides. Oops. So the FTC Green Guides are, as they sound, rules and regulations put out by the Federal Trade Commission that really shape how marketers are supposed to communicate to us about sustainability. And the Federal Trade Commission is the part of the American government that oversees consumer protection. So I was a bit surprised, to be honest, to find out that there was this whole department of the government that's supposed to be sort of on top of this, right? Like really looking at how brands are marketing to us about sustainability and really shaping it. So the Green Guides were launched in 1992. There have been multiple revisions. And they really got their start because what was happening in 1992 is similar to what was happening today. There was a really big interest in environmentally friendly products. And there was this really big gap between what marketers were saying to consumers and how we interpreted those claims. So the FTC kind of set about trying to clarify this very big gray area of how companies communicate to us about what is and isn't green. So the Green Guides kind of oversee general principles that apply to all environmental marketing claims. They also try to understand how we interpret brand claims And then they offer guidance on how marketers can qualify their claims to avoid deceiving consumers. Now, I know we have already covered a lot of kind of technical stuff, and we're actually going to leave time for questions. So if something comes up as Corey and I are talking that you have questions about, just drop your questions into the chat, and Emily is going to moderate. So if you just have something comes to mind, just drop it in the chat. So already, and this was very surprising to me, the Green Guides already have recommendations to brands about how to communicate about all sorts of terms. They have qualifications for how to define if something's eco-friendly, if something's compostable, if something's degradable, if something's recyclable, renewable, made with renewable energy. They already have guidelines for marketers on these issues. And in 2012, the FTC did its most recent revision. And you're probably all thinking that was like the dark ages. You know what I mean? Like, that's a long time ago, and the conversation has evolved a lot. But some of the big updates at that time were the FTC warned companies against making broad, unqualified claims like environmentally friendly, eco-friendly, because really what that does is it suggests to consumers that a product has far-reaching environmental benefits. But we all know, like, a product is not really benefiting the environment. So brands really have to like qualify what they mean by that. And then the other big update in 2012 had to do with biodegradability, because a lot of products started coming out that said that they were biodegradable, but because they end up in a landfill or recycling facility or incinerator, the FTC decided that those products were often misleading because they weren't actually getting they weren't being biodegraded, even if the product itself was technically biodegradable. So that leads me to, well, let me just breeze through this really quickly. The FTC does every now and then actually enforce these rules. It doesn't happen as often as I think that it should, and I hope that Corey can maybe explain why. But every now and then the FTC will get involved and crack down on companies. Probably the most recent really big case in fashion had to do with brands overusing bamboo claims to make rayon sound like it was a natural material, when really rayon is this very like chemically intensive material. Yeah, the government issued like millions of dollars in fines to companies, including Amazon, Macy's, Sears, that were misleading consumers. And then that leads us up to today. And I'm so excited to have Corey Spencer from AMENDI here with us, because he has been really instrumental in going to the FTC and asking them to update the Green Guides, which is so amazing, and really just I think is another example of something we always talk about here, which is collective action and getting together with other people to try and make change. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and ask Corey to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about AMENDI. And then I also want to know, Corey, what your favorite, most egregious example of greenwashing is.
Hey guys, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So my name is Corey Spencer. I am super humbled to be here, especially with Elizabeth, who's someone that I've followed and been inspired by since my sustainable fashion career. I got into the fashion industry through retail. So I started like on the front lines, and I essentially this was in mid 2000s. I started to see brands play with organic, and that was a fascinating thing with me. That's really what triggered my interest, because when I first engaged with a product that was organic, or said it was organic, it was at a time when it was just organic foods was happening. And so it was like, it caused this sort of like, I didn't even know what it meant. It was one of those like kind of, it was an awakening moment. Through that process, I ended up in my fashion career, becoming very involved with a brand called Nudie Jeans, which was a pioneer in the organic denim industry, which was also founded by a woman who I just want to mention briefly, named Maria Erickson. She takes a backseat in the brand, but she's a major pioneer in the organic cotton movement because she essentially just gathered suppliers and said, I want to make organic denim. I don't want to make commercial denim. And there was no demand for it. So she's a real inspiration for me in my career and just how to process or how to proceed inside the dregs or like the back end of this industry. But essentially, AMENDI is a culmination of my and my partner's passion about what we think the fashion industry can and should look like. That's basically it. It's basically taking the knowledge that we have and the passion we have. We often call ourselves terrible business people because we don't follow these easy paths which are set up inside the industry for you to make money. The supply chain, as I know you guys know, the supply chain in the fashion industry is convoluted, but it's made, if you have money, it's made to be easy to access to make products. So if you have money and you can make the connections, then you can enter into this world, and these suppliers will essentially do everything for you. And often that leads to, because of the way the systems are set up, it leads to egregious behavior non-consciously. So you're doing it without really thinking about it, or not nefariously, but because you're not asking questions, the suppliers will go the route to hit costs, to hit profits, because that's just the nature of the system. AMENDI, maybe we can talk more deeply about it. But first, I guess what I'll do is I'll start with what I wanted to talk about as far as the greenwashing thing. It's a little bit of insider baseball, but because you guys are sort of next level, I thought it'd be fun to discuss this. So certifications are an important part of the sustainable fashion movement, but they're also a complicated part of the sustainable fashion movement because while they are generally helpful, they are also confusing. And they're not super clear. Just like when a company can say something is sustainable, if someone says this is BCI certified or this is just quote unquote certified, what does that mean? So there is no standard of certification inside of any government in terms of the fashion industry. So what I wanted to do is provide an example of what I would consider a questionable certification. I'm going to walk you through where I see problems just briefly, and also give you what my thought process is now being inside this industry for a bit. So let me see if I can pull this up real quick. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. All right, can you see this? All right, so this is the Better Cotton Initiative website. This is a certification, one of the largest certifications, if not the largest in the world, for being a certified cotton initiative. The problem, so the first thing I would say just about when you're entering or trying to just see if there's red flags for greenwashing or questionable is the more clicks it takes to get specific information. So the more clicks it takes you to get specific information, I would call the more red flags there are that there's a problem. So for me, I want information right away in my face. I want data in my face as fast as possible so that then I can interpret it myself because I'm a thinking human engaging in products, so I want to know. So if I go to BCI and I want to learn more about BCI, first I could read the start of this, and it's going to tell me, it's going to sell me on what this initiative is. It's going to tell me this is a nonprofit organization, largest sustainability. It's going to tell me it's huge. It's going to tell me that it has all these partners, including Nike, including H&M, part of their eco-conscious, collection. It's going to have pictures of people picking cotton, the whole deal. But then it's not going to give me any specific information, which I could forgive on the front facing. But if I go to About BCI, just one click further. Actually, I'll go to About Better Cotton. I can read, and I won't read this to you. You can read this entire copy and not get any specific information about what is happening in the certification. There is no specific data point. It just says that they're doing better things, it's leading to better environment, et cetera, et cetera. I've literally clicked through this website now 3 or 4 times. If you go deeper, you won't get information. I know a little bit about BCI in terms of the data points. And I guess I would say that Yvon Chouinard from Patagonia said it sort of simply already about BCI, and I'll quote him. This is his quote: "It's complete bullshit." So it's sort of one of those things where, as a brand, I can buy this certification, have it hooked into I can say that my cotton or my t-shirt is now certified, and the general public who maybe wants to do good will buy it feeling like they're doing something laudable, when I can say that it's the bare minimum and definitely shouldn't be considered sustainable. So that's my example of like one of the more nefarious sort of back end problems in terms of the greenwashing. The H&M front facing stuff is horrible, almost laughable. This to me is almost like a level deeper in terms of, especially if you're acting as a brand trying to do good. Like, this is a third party trying to help you promote a certain sort of thing that is not necessarily true.
Corey, can I ask you? Can I ask you a question? Can I jump in?
Please.
So
Please do.
I'm, when I look at my own Instagram feed, there are so many of these claims that there appears to already be like some guidance on. Like, I was just putting different greenwashing rules that exist in different countries, like that we don't just have them in the United States, they have them in the EU. I'm curious, like why I guess, how much can the green guides do, and why is it something that you have gotten involved in, and like which parts of this can it really address?
Yeah. Oh, I first want to say that I hooked up with the green guide situation through the article that Elizabeth mentioned. I was doing my due diligence as just a person in this industry. I read this article, and she listed people who were engaged in this, including the New Standard Institute and Hilary Jacquemins for Politically in Fashion. And I literally just started to reach out to them. And when I hooked up, Elizabeth is extremely instrumental just in this happening. And she also was the provider of information to someone like me to execute this. So when I hooked up with Hilary Jacquemins from Politically in Fashion, who Elizabeth mentioned in her article, Hilary was willing to engage with me in this, and then teach me also a lot more deeply of just about the green guides and what can happen. And what's fascinating, or why we decided to go for it, was, one, it's actually low-hanging fruit. It's one of those things where, I think I can say safely that we don't have to deal with Congress when we deal with the FTC green guides. We want to engage with Congress eventually, but this is like, let's bypass that quagmire, which we know is a years long thing, and let's execute this thing we know we can do now, because there's only 2 of us doing this. And so we did that. So the green guides, I would say, let's just be frank, is low-hanging fruit. But what's important about it, from my perspective, is I have the emotional side and my personal side, which is like, it's not okay to lie or to overemphasize things to consumers. But also from a business standpoint, like if I'm a sustainable fashion business person and I believe in that movement, then I want to clean it up. I want to level the playing field. I will never be on the same level. We don't plan to be on the same level as H&M, right? We don't want to be a $1 billion company traded by the markets, controlled by, like, I have to greenwash in order to sustain. We would rather say, like, you can't use the same words we can if you're not doing the same things. So the FTC is just like, here are the actual definitions for these words you use. So if you use the word sustainable, then you have to follow this criteria. To us, it's like the bare minimum. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that we don't talk about that enough as a community. Like, it hurts sustainable brands when brands are able to just market however they want.
Exactly.
And I'm curious, do you know what revisions you're going to ask for? I had heard at some point maybe we were going to try and get a definition for sustainability, circularity. What are y'all thinking should be the big updates?
Yeah, it's funny because, you know, Hillary as a lawyer, she does this so well. Hillary's not here because she just had a baby, so I just want to applaud her quickly. But yeah, but she would say that we don't specifically have requests, but rather we would have a community engage in what we think would be the best things. But me personally, what I would say is we need to have a definition for as many words as possible, down pat, that people can agree on. And the thing where it gets interesting is that when we start this conversation, we really need to get as many people and brands, small brands, as possible engaged, because if big guys come in on the conversation, they will try to dominate it because they're in survival mode. They want to make sure that they control this conversation. But we have the opportunity right now to keep it.
Yeah, I saw that for the 2012 update, there were over 350 comments submitted by the American public. There were lots of roundtables that the fashion industry participated in. Yeah. So is this like moves forward? Should we follow AMENDI? Should we follow you? Like, how do we keep up with what's going on?
Yeah, I would say, thank you. Yeah, I would definitely say you can follow AMENDI. You can follow us on Instagram. You can sign up for our newsletters. You could also follow Politically in Fashion and Hillary. And I'm also sure that you're, you know, obviously if people don't follow you, because I'm sure you'll be, you know, updating people as we move along. But it's a 2-year process. It's a long process. But what's great is that the FTC is like, just tell us what you want. So they're willing to take information. This is what I found fascinating too. Maybe. Yeah, but it's just like, there's this weird leap that happened after I read your article and engaged in this process. It's literally just about communication. It's just communicating, learning, and then communicating that to people who can make those changes. That's all it is. But yeah, the FTC has already said, send us information. So that's,
and consumers and citizens will be able to participate too, right? Like, we'll be able to submit comments. Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
so we have to be ready for that, everybody.
Yeah. No, exactly. No, you guys and your organizations are like extremely instrumental. And so the real goal now is to sort of organize how that communication happens and how it can be submitted. But yeah, that's a huge deal. Yeah. It'll be extremely important.
So Corey, you've already opened a can of worms by bringing up the certification. So we have some questions flowing in that I think Emily is going to moderate. Should we go ahead and start those?
Yeah,
sure. That would be great. So this is a question kind of about the legally binding nature. So the question says, in my understanding, the FTC Green Guides are not legally binding, and the only way to hold a company truly accountable would be through the courts. We know that courts are typically very pro-business. So how would we actually enforce this kind of regulation?
I would love to hear what Corey has to say, but one thing that I do know, you know, that it's true, they're not laws, they're recommendations, and that the FTC does investigate and fine companies. And my understanding is that getting them to enforce them, we need to do a little bit better job as consumers as well, logging complaints when we see greenwashing. There's actually a complaint form on the FTC website that I encourage people to use. But Corey, I'm curious what you think. Why is enforcement often so weak of these rules? And do you have hope that that will improve?
I mean, I try to not go cynical in this space because it's so easy. But one reason why it's weak is because we're a capitalist country. We want to uplift and sustain that we want to uplift and sustain profits for businesses. We don't want to hurt them at all. And it's the more power you have as a business, the more that you can fight against any sort of regulation. It's always been that push and pull. Do I feel like there will be more regulation? Yeah, I think it's inevitable. personally. I think these brands know it's inevitable. You can see it in their marketing schemes. You can see it in them sort of being both actually changing and then also trying to even greenwash harder in some ways. So I do think it's inevitable that it will happen. The green guides, as far as recommendations, or, you know, like Elizabeth said, what's important about them is they can find companies. Not only that, especially the context now, is they can blow your spot up. So if you're, for instance, because of the power of whatever social media movements in general, if you hone in on brands who do something nefarious, you can really hurt them. Like you can really check them rather, you know? So like the Volkswagen, if I remember this right, the Volkswagen emissions scandal actually broke through the FCC green guides. Also, what's important to mention is that the FCC green guides, or the FCC in general, they investigate through tips. So it's not like they're out there checking everything. They actually investigate through tips, just like if you tip the FBI off or something. It's literally the same thing. So if you're a consumer and you are concerned about a brand doing something, you can just contact the FTC, and if you do it enough or with enough power, they'll likely look into it. So it is an effective bureaucracy. Is it perfect? No, it's a bureaucracy, you know?
Yeah, so it's
again,
like,
sort of
it's a good first step. And I also dropped the phone number and the website into the chat. And also, like, much like so many things we do here at Remake, like tagging brands, especially when we do it collectively, is really powerful because brands are reputationally sensitive. Okay, I know we have a lot of other questions, so.
Yeah, so there's been another kind of round of questions about if there are certifications that you do trust. So people throwing out B Corp, GOTS, Fair Trade, if you'd like to speak to any of those.
Should I answer this? All right, still resisting cynicism here. I got to know certifications way more deeply just through the process of starting a brand and trying to understand how we wanted to be certified and in what ways. And that's also why I would say this in general: regulation is better than certifications. And that always will be the case. Certifications are run by communities, and even though they are nonprofit, that does not mean that money is off the table. Many of them require expensive investments from suppliers to be certified, and then for brands also to engage. So the problem is you could have a brand that's doing really good things, but they're not certified, they're at a disadvantage, et cetera. You could have a small supplier in a country that's not certified, but they're doing amazing work, but they don't want to pay $20,000 a year for a certification. So they're complicated. Certifications that AMENDI trusts, you can actually look on our website. We list all of the certifications we utilize, but we also list definitions of them and all the sites you can check out what they mean. And then you can really decide for yourself how relevant or not you feel they are. For me, we trusted GOTS certification probably the most, mainly because it's comprehensive, both from an organic standpoint and also from a social standpoint. So they include both of them. It was also there's quite a few scientists who sit on the board of GOTS and who advise GOTS, and their third-party auditors are usually trained super well. So if you go inside it's insider baseball again, but if you go inside how they operate, we trust that certification the most. We only use GOTS certification for our cotton, et cetera. But that's one of them that I trust, you know? There are several great ones. It's just that, yeah, there's one.
And yeah, and my understanding is part of the power of something like the green guides would be agreeing on language around certification. So if there are limitations or a certification only goes so far, the consumer should know that. Like, you know, a lot of times, like you were saying, Zara will say, I use BCI and therefore my cotton is sustainable. Well, that is overstating it. So it really is about being a lot more clear about the limitations of what you're doing as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so then our last question before we kind of transition to Remake's advocacy work, I think this is a good way to take us there. So it's about like, what can we do? So you mentioned logging the complaints. If we know that regulation and campaigning and advocacy is what's important here, like how can we help? How can we help make a difference?
Yeah, I can go first with that. And I'm seeing a lot of really good debate in the chat about the limits of regulation and the limits of what the government can do. And I think that that's important to talk through. Like, no matter what, our community and being actively engaged as consumers, as citizens, is always going to be so important, because we can get all of these regulations and guidelines in place, but if we don't continue to show our elected leaders that this is something that we take very seriously and that it matters to us, that we want to have authentic advertising that isn't deceptive, then, you know, regulation is only going to get us so far. So that's one way I kind of feel like our community is already doing a lot of this work. I see people constantly calling out greenwashing online. And I think that it's actually very, very helpful to hold companies accountable. And we have these free tools on social media to do it. I think maybe where we can get better is definitely participating in this conversation when the Green Guide revisions come up next year, and also like doing more like collective actions around greenwashing instead of just everybody kind of like randomly targeting different companies. Yeah, Corey, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Yeah, no, I think that makes total sense.
Oh, we're losing him a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, can you hear me all right?
Just losing you a little bit.
Sorry, guys. You got me back?
Yeah, just the connection is a little weak. I apologize. Aisha, I wanted to give you the stage for
Sorry,
a minute.
guys. No, my fault. No,
no worries.
That's
Just
okay.
to kind of tie this into the work we're doing here at Remake, you know, maybe you have a perspective on this and like how this community work ties in.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things that I wanted to share with you all, even in the early founding days of Remake, this was a question we kept getting over and over again. I'm confused. There is so many certifications and claims out there. And it seems as though every time from an education standpoint, we get savvier around asking brands the tougher questions, because they have, you know, billions of dollars of marketing money and lobbying money. They co-opt the things we care about and make it again into a pretty marketing campaign. And so the reason we wanted to have this conversation in August is because Becca had alluded to the fact that it's been 5 years since our Remake seal of approval process was created, as well as our brand directory. And so over the summer, we've been very furiously updating that, because 5 years is a good time to then take a look at the state of the industry, as well as really how brands have behaved during COVID. And so right before the holiday season, you know, early November is when we will be publishing our updated directory, as well as the process of, you know, how we're rating these brands. Yes, lots of excitement there. And I really hope that this is something that can be a tool for all of you, both to hold brands accountable, but also to help with your holiday shopping. You know, we're not much of, in terms of citizens here at Remake, we spend more of our time in advocacy. But if you want to buy something, rest assured that no money exchanges hands. There is no ways that we're connected to the industry at all. Something that Corey said was really important, that, you know, having been in the belly of the beast, looking at auditing and certifications, a lot of it is pay to play. And even for nonprofit certifications, if you follow the money around, well, where is it coming from? Most of these certifications are largely funded by the large brands. And so it ends up becoming the lowest common denominator. And I'll leave you all with, just in looking at and reflecting, and we've been talking to lots of stakeholders in the social justice and the human rights and environmental space, there's a few things that hopefully our directory will be tackling full on. The first is really this conversation around degrowth rather than circularity. Fashion brands are putting out way too much product. There's no way we're going to address the climate crisis unless we're talking about, well, how many units of virgin material in a linear model are you putting out, rather than simply talking about the few cute little capsule collections or sustainable materials where a portion is recyclable. So degrowth will really be front and center. And the second is really looking at everything through a social justice lens. I think, not just are there human rights abuses in your supply chain, but are you thinking about this from a climate justice lens in terms of the communities most impacted, rather than simply talking about, reducing your CO2 at a headquarter level, but by the way, you're dumping product into communities without thinking about them. So a lot more to come there. But I hope our community is walking away knowing the directory is going to drop with the updated report first week of November, and that as the FTC guidance comes around, Elizabeth will really help rally our community so there's an easy way for us to weigh into, well, what should these guidelines and what should these terms define, and for us to have a voice in the process. And that's really what we're all about, right? Assuring that our community has a voice in a process and a way to hold the big brands accountable.
Thank you. Elizabeth, I think you have a couple of advocacy updates for us, and then that'll send us out.
Yes. Okay. Thanks everybody for staying until the end. I know we've covered a lot of ground today. So I'm just going to give a few quick advocacy updates. So the two campaigns we've been working on are the Garment Worker Protection Act in California and the Bangladesh Accord on Fire and Safety. And I just have to start by saying that this community has just been doing an incredible job supporting these two campaigns, and that we really are making an impact in both of them. So I'm excited to just give a couple updates and just tell you all how you can stay involved. So the main thing to know is that we're in the home stretch on both of these initiatives. SB 62, the Garment Worker Protection Act, is going to come across California Governor Newsom's desk in September. We don't know the exact date yet. So the big pivot here is everything that you post about SB 62 from here on out, you should tag the governor and the first partner, Jennifer Siebel Newsom. I actually just freshened our cheat sheet and toolkit on SB 62. So this call to action is very clear. And the reason why this is really important is because some big business interests are trying to weaken the bill and get Newsom to think that this is something that big businesses in California don't want. But of course, we have a coalition of over 140 apparel brands who proudly support SB 62. It's simply not true that there isn't business support for the bill. We have huge business support for the bill. And he just needs to know how important this is to our community. And the other thing I'll just quickly note is when you're communicating about SB 62, make sure people understand that this is not just important to California. It is important to consumers everywhere because clothes manufactured in California are sold globally. And some of the biggest companies that have used sweatshops in California include Forever 21, TJ Maxx, Ross Dress for Less. So this really is an issue that impacts all of us. And it really is a bill about fighting for a better future of the fashion industry. So moving away from fast fashion and supporting ethical and sustainable production. So it's just huge. And I'll drop the action kit in the chat so you guys have that. And let me know if you have questions. So the Accord on Fire and Building Safety, we are also in the home stretch. And I know it's kind of hard to be campaigning on two different things, but like I just really appreciate all of y'all because it really makes a difference. The big update there is that we are launching a tracker on August 4th so on Wednesday, that will show which brands are supporting the Accord and which ones are still just on the fence. And the really good news is right now we have 5 brands who are supporting the Accord, and that list is going to more than double this week. And you're going to see some, I can't say who, but there are some really big companies you're going to see on the list this week. So that is because of y'all. Like, that is because of the power of this community putting pressure on these companies. The Accord was something that brands thought no one was paying attention to, and we have made this list longer. We have made more brands commit to it. And I forgot, I skipped over what the Accord is for those of you who are maybe new to the campaign, but it's an agreement to keep workers from dying in factories. It's really what it's about. So my big ask on the Accord is we've been doing a lot of letter writing emails to brands. From here on out, the pressure is going to be on social media. We need to go back to using our handy dandy pay up strategy and tag brands and tell them protect the Accord. I will also drop the action kit for the Accord into the chat. We are still mainly pressuring 5 brands: H&M, Zara, Tommy Hilfiger, C&A, and American Eagle Outfitters. If that list is too long, focus on the American companies, Tommy and AEO, because right now there is not a single American company that has supported the Accord. So yeah, that's kind of my roundup on that. And if you have any other questions, reach out to me or Emily, or hit us up on Instagram. And thank you so much. You guys are amazing. And it's always such a great way to start the month out talking to all of you.
Yes. Well, I just wanted to close us out by saying, as always, you all have shown up in strength and numbers. It is working. So thank you for your time and attention. As Elizabeth said, it's go time. So this is the time. The next month, we'll know whether or not the Accord is renewed. We'll know whether or not SB 62 signed into law. So the next 4 weeks are very critical. As always, this is now my time to remind you all that we as a nonprofit rely 100% on individual donations. We take no corporate money whatsoever. We're going to drop in the chat our donation link. Know that, whether it's a $5, $10 reoccurring donation, something where like, I'll just skip that one kombucha or coffee or what have you, that's what allows us to do this work. So if there's any way that you are able to give, know that it makes a difference, especially as our campaigning really heats up over the next month. So Emily's dropped that in the chat. There was a question here around letter writing and other ways to support SB 62. Right, fresh off the presses are our beautiful past SB 62 postcards for our community organizers on the call. Know that we're going to have a series of events. We just did one here in San Francisco. I'm coming to Los Angeles August 12th for our community to galvanize with media and community citizens to write postcards. But if you want postcards, we can ship them to you. They're all addressed to Governor Newsom, ready to go. So we're making the letter writing really easy. So hit up Emily if you want us to send you a shipment. I just wanted to take a last moment to thank Corey and Elizabeth, and to all of you, our wonderful community. Have a great August. Let's make some noise as always. Thank you, everyone. Take care.